Greetings, fellow Hyperboreans. Dave here, the developer of the Hyperborea system for Foundry VTT, here to bring you another video about the system and the latest developments. So today's video actually covers the last two releases, so it's a little bit of a roll-up feature demo. We're covering release 1.20 and 1.21, and we're just talking about the different updates that we've added to these two feature releases. So starting with release 1.20, the first thing was improving some chat messages when an active effect is applied. I actually got a request from a user wondering if we could include things like the duration of an effect and also like if it's doing damage or something in the chat alert when an effect is applied. What I determined was I did the easy one first, which is the duration. So as an example, I'll just demonstrate this very quickly. I'm going to try and keep these fairly quick today because I've got a lot of things to go over. So we're going to cast the haste spell. Andronakos will cast that, and we will apply it to Argyros, the fighter. So we just do that. And now you can see haste, 18 rounds applied to Argyros by Andronakos. I've bolded Argyros and of course bolded the spell or the effect that's been put upon him. That was the first update or change to the system as part of release 1.20. Okay, number 2 was to add attribute modifiers for thief progressive abilities. So those of you who know the thief skills available to thieves and their subclasses, if you have an attribute of 16 or higher in Dex or Intelligence or Wisdom, that can apply a +1 bonus to certain thief skills. So I have actually now built that into the system so you don't have to remember it necessarily. So as an example, we've got Artemisia the thief here. She happens to have a Dex of 17. Her Int is 11, Wisdom is 15, so those are both less than 16, so they will not be able to apply any bonuses. And so if we just do a very quick example here, you'll see what this looks like. If I do Discern Noise, which would be Wisdom based, there's no bonus here, obviously, because her Wisdom is less than 16. It's only a 15. So we just have to do the roll. But if I do Climb, as an example, that one can get a Dex bonus if her Dex is high enough. And you can see it just adds it as a situational modifier, Dex modifier of +1, and it just puts a 1 in there. So that's how that works. And we use that ability, and that changes her target from, well, it leaves the target of 8, but of course it subtracts 1 from the dice roll as the sort of +1 bonus. So the 7 becomes a 6, and it succeeds. So that's how that one works. That's the second change, new feature added as part of this release 1.20. Let's see, number 3, we've got adding equipped weapon and shield as overlap images to the tokens. So that's all right here. You can see all that right here, and you can see my various tokens have little tiny overlapping circle images. These are weapon and shield or dual weapon for dual wielding scenarios. It does work with both player characters and monsters. So these zombies don't have anything equipped, but these skeletons, I went ahead and gave them small shields and bows and equipped them. And so you can see that they've got these, and this big ugly orc here, he's got the same thing. So what I want to do though is, in addition to just displaying the image, I also added some logic. This is an optional thing that you can enable, which is to enforce proper equipping of weapons and shields. And by that I mean, as an example, you can dual wield, but only if your Dex is 13 or higher, and both weapons are weapon class 2 or less. Normally, anyone can hold a weapon, one weapon and one shield, or just one weapon and no shield. But if you switch to a two-handed weapon, then you have to drop your shield. And so the system will actually take care of that, but there are a couple of instances where, as an example, I switch from sword and board, right, a sword plus shield, to a two-handed sword. I'm just going to do that. We'll just do that with Argyros because I've got him set up for this, so I don't need to just talk. I can show. So we'll go here, and what we've got, first thing I want to point out also is I added a number of hands indicator right here to weapons. And if you just create a new weapon, it's going to default to 1, which is just this single open hand icon over there. And you can see the tooltip. If I mouse over that and hold it, it says 1 hand. and I mouse back over here and it says two hands. Now, when you first update your system, the system is going to run a migration script. It's actually going to look at the names of your weapons, and if it sees something like two-handed, or I think if it sees the word great, and a few other items, it's going to convert those ones to two hands automatically. But I would recommend double checking just to make sure I didn't miss anything, or maybe you spelled the word differently or whatever. I would recommend double checking those, because otherwise all your weapons are going to be one-handed, and you would definitely want to flag those as two-handed if you can. So once you've got a weapon flagged as two-handed like this, then if you look at Argyros now, you can see currently I have a large shield equipped, right? It's got the little t-shirt icon lit up there, and he's got his broadsword, his flame brand lit up here. But if I switch to the two-handed shield just by clicking that, you're going to see not only does the sword get unequipped, but the shield also was unequipped. And you can see you get a notification that he equipped the two-handed sword. It's not going to talk about what you unequipped in the process, but it does just mention that you've equipped the two-handed sword. And then when I switch back to the one-handed sword, the system doesn't know that you want to also equip a shield, so you will have to manage that. So players, just realize that if you're switching between one and two-handed weapons, when you switch back to a one-handed weapon and you want to equip a shield, you're going to have to do that, manage it yourself manually. Okay? Same goes for dual wielding. So if I go to Artemisia here, who does have a high enough dexterity, and she's got dual short swords, slightly different icons I gave them, then she can switch between dual and single wielding. Like, for example, she's dual wielding right now, as you can see. She also happens to own a shield, but she doesn't have that equipped, of course, because she is dual wielding. She can switch to her short bow. When she does that, it drops both of the dual wielded weapons, because the short bow cannot be dual wielded. But the other thing to realize is when she switches back to a short sword, remember, the system doesn't know she wants to dual wield necessarily. It's not like we have a flag in there to track automatic dual wield when possible or anything. So the player does, once again, have to dual wield those weapons. And even if I switch to another melee weapon, which I don't have set up on Artemisia, but just realize if she switched from the two short swords to a dagger, it would not change her to dual wielding a short sword and a dagger. It would drop both short swords and replace it with the dagger. Once again, the default is to play it conservative. The default behavior of the system is to play it conservative, whether you're switching from a two-handed weapon to a sword and board, or a sword and shield to a two-handed weapon. It's going to drop sort of everything, and it requires you to re-equip things, or switching from dual wielding to single wielding and then back, you just have to make sure you equip both weapons if that's what you want to do. It's obviously just a button click, so it's not like it's difficult, just something to be aware of. Okay, let's see, was there anything else I wanted to demonstrate on that? Oh yes, I just wanted to talk about the icons themselves. So you can see these little icons, and if I open up the item, maybe you can see that a little better. Now these are custom by me. What I did was I actually took some images that ship with or come with your default Foundry system. So this little short sword picture actually comes right out of the Foundry core system, but that icon in Foundry core is a square image with a colored background. So what I've done is I surrounded it in a ring, and I stripped out the background and I made it transparent. Okay, I found that this actually looks reasonably nice with the transparent background. Then you can see your token showing through. If I zoom in here, you can see this a little better. Hopefully you all can see this. You can see the way they overlap. You can tell it's transparent with the main token image showing through there. But the little brown ring helps to make it a little more visible, especially for weapons that are difficult to see. As an example, if I flip Artemisia over to her short bow, that one I found was a little bit difficult to see. You can see that right there, but if I zoom back out to where I might be here, to me that's a little bit hard to read. It's just a fact of life, right? These are small images. Sometimes they can be hard to read. So just having that little circle around there at least tells you, yeah, I've got something equipped. And if you focus in on it a little more, then you can realize, oh, that's her bow. No big deal. So that's how that works, though. And again, Argyros sword and board. If I flip him over to his two-handed sword. Now, I don't have a custom icon for the two-handed sword. So when we go back here, you can see it just replaced it with the default cross sword and shield icon indicating a weapon, but obviously I don't know what weapon. So I would want to, as a player or a GM, I would want to replace that with a real sword icon, preferably different than my long sword icon, like the flame brand. Click this here. I wouldn't want to use the same one for a long sword or broadsword as I do for a two-hander, but have some way of being able to tell those apart. So that is that. We'll go ahead and re-equip that, and we'll re-equip his shield. So then he's back to normal. And yeah, I think that pretty well covers that. So we just discussed two features here. Number one was adding the equipped weapon and shield as overlapping images on the tokens. And again, it works the same way for NPCs if they have equipment equipped to equip. And then number two was the equipping rules. Now just realize that the equipping rules that I just demonstrated, those only apply on the character sheet. So an NPC, I can kind of do whatever I want. The assumption here is that, well, first of all, GMs are often managing half a dozen or more NPCs at a time. That's just way too fiddly for one person to have to mess around with all the time. So I just said, you know what, I'm not even going to force the GM to follow those same rules necessarily. A player running one character, even if the player is running two characters, that's pretty easy to manage. But when you're starting to get up to the numbers that referees have to deal with, it's just not, it just becomes unwieldy. So, but I did add these equip options to the NPC sheet. This was another user request. I think this is actually later in my notes, so I may accidentally tackle this again. But you know, again, I can equip a spiked cudgel, and it just changes the weapon icon. It doesn't change because it's the default icon for both weapons, but it would be trying to swap if it could. Again, the shield there, I can do that. I guess the difference is the spiked cudgel, I think, might be a two-hander. So yeah, because he drops his sword every time. So anyways, works with, like I said, I don't have to equip things to make them take effect, but I can do it to show off the item that the NPC happens to be using, even if it's just for fun, because it's certainly no technical requirement for it. On the player sheets, yes, you do have to have stuff equipped. Like I have to have that shield equipped to get the AC bonus on my character sheet. On an NPC sheet, there's no auto calculation of armor class. He just has an armor class filled in, right? Right here, 6. That doesn't change just because I equip or unequip a shield. So GMs also be wary of that. Be aware of that, referees, that if I'm equipping a shield or unequipping, I would need to manually change that number. Okay? That's about all I've got to say about that then. And that actually does cover release 1.20, everything that went there. It was mostly the weapon and shield overlay, and the attribute modifiers for thief abilities, and then the chat message, that little addition to the chat message to include the duration on temporary effects. Okay, so now moving to release 1.21, we got a few things. The first item was to create a configuration option so that the GM can hide. Okay, I'm just going to show you once again. We're going to go into Andronakos, my wizard, but what we're actually going to look at is this wand of fireballs. So those of you have seen fairly recently, in a recent release within the last few months, I added the ability to assign spells to items so that you can have something like a wand of fireballs that casts a fireball spell, okay? And I had a has spells checkbox that I added, and that's, if I uncheck that, you see the spells tab disappeared, and you can no longer cast spells from this item. Once I check that box, now the spells thing appears, and the spell that I've assigned to it, fireball, is there, and you've got your charges and stuff like that. Should put that there. Anyways, going here then, this is the new feature I added, was the ability to hide charges from players, okay? And the idea here is twofold. Number one, it sort of maintains a bit of mystery surrounding magic items and how often they might be used before running out of charges. Just because you've got an expert player who knows that a wand might have between 21 and 40 charges, and could be less actually, doesn't mean that, you know, the character necessarily knows, I have exactly 13 charges left on this wand, so I'm going to use it for, you know, a few key instances so I don't use it up too early or something like that. If you make it a little more mysterious, now the player has a guessing game of, I wonder if the next time I use this, I'm going to run out of charges. So it's like I say, it adds some mystery to it, may help prevent some metagaming. This is optional, by the way, and by default, when you click has spells, hide charges is not checked. So I did it here, of course, but the default option would be, if I just do this, this is not going to be checked. So The default option is to leave it open, and if you don't want to use this feature, don't use it. Just don't check the box. And then the players will be able to see the charges. And by the way, I'm going to show you that. So I'm going to go over here. Here I'm logged in as a player. And let's see. So I've got high charges is not selected. So if I go to Andronakos then and I go into his wand of fireballs, and if I go in as a player, of course I can see everything here. But if I do this as the GM, now the player is going to see just a little bit of asterisks. So it hides that from the player. Now the charges used for a spell, that's still available. It's read-only, by the way. It cannot be edited by players. That's only editable by the GM. Same for the casting ability. But the player is allowed to see that information, because I think, at least I personally thought, that it would be reasonable for a player to know if a spell is going to use 1 charge or 2 charges or 3 charges or whatever. But they don't know the total number of charges, so that's where the mystery comes in. So anyways, that's how that feature works. And yeah, that pretty well demonstrates that one. So the next feature is to modify the armor template, to differentiate between shields and armor or non-shield items. So if you have used the system for a while, you may be aware that when you want to create a shield, you have to actually say, okay, I'm going to do, I'm just going to do a small shield, right? Put a comma in there, make it nice. You would have to select armor, then you would create the item. Then here, under weight class, you would select shield. So your regular armor is light, medium, heavy. Unarmored could be used for things like class abilities, like the monk's defensive ability. Basically, the idea is these weight classes affect your movement. So unarmored is a movement of 40. Actually, light might be 40 as well. Yeah, it is. But if I go to medium, then you would change that to 30, and heavy is 20. Anyways, but shield was what you would do for shields. And the other thing was you always got a generic shield icon, whether you were doing armor or shields right here. So I've changed the system now. If you select armor, you're going to get an armor icon, but you also don't need to do this anymore. So the new way of doing this, let me just get rid of this guy here. With this feature, if I do create an item, I now can do, I'm just going to do shield, and shield is now an option in the drop-down list. So now when I select that, I get a slightly simplified, I don't have some of the options that are only usable for armor anyway, like the movement and the damage reduction. And shield type, you can select small, large, or passive. Now what is passive? Passive is used for things like magic abilities or magic spells that apply an armor class bonus like a shield, but they don't actually affect your ability to also carry a physical shield. So you might be carrying a small shield, but cast a spell or even wear a ring of protection or something that has a shield-like effect, in that it's applying a modifier to your armor class as opposed to just a straight-up base AC. So this is going to apply a base 1. Obviously, I could change it to a 2 if I go large. And passive can be anything you want. So it could be whatever, ring of protection +3. Well, maybe you're putting a +3 in here then. But a shield also has the shield icon. So that's the same old icon that used to be used for both armor and shields. Now when you select shield, you get a shield. When you select armor, you get armor, and you can see in my list over here on the right, all my armors have been converted to the armor icon. My shields retain the shield icon from before, unless I've used a custom one like this new one here. So the other thing to be aware of is with this release 1.21, the system will actually go through your world items, which is the items that are in the items directory over here on the right. Also anything owned by an actor, not necessarily on a token, but anything that's owned by one of your actors. So if I look at my mercenaries as an example, and I go to my archer and say, oh yeah, look at that, he's got leather armor. And you can see it's got the armor icon there. So the system is actually cycling through those, a one-time migration, and it swaps out the shield for the armor for armor pieces. For shields, it leaves it alone, of course. It also converts shields to the new shield type. So you may notice that when you go in and you open up your characters, suddenly their shield is actually the new type. It uses the new one, and it's got a shield type here, and it's basically been converted to the new item type. I should say that, first of all, referees, players, you're going to want to double check everything, make sure that converted okay. And secondly, and kind of disappointingly, like I host my games on ForgeVTT.com. The conversion fails just for the armor icon. It's really weird. I think it has to do with the way Forge has kind of an overlay management layer, and I think that's sort of intercepting the path that I'm trying to provide to this icon, and it's quietly, silently rejecting it without giving me any error messages. So I haven't been able to prove it, but that's the symptom that I'm seeing, is that the migration runs, the shields get converted to the shield item type, but the armor icon never changes as part of the same migration. So it's like, I know the migration code's running, I know it's working. Anyway, just be aware, if you're using ForgeVTT.com, your armor icons are not going to be updated. You'll have to do those manually. And if you're using some other hosting service, you may have the same problem. I don't know. Like I said, I think it's probably Forge's own management layer that they have on top of Foundry. So if you're running a hosting service or using a hosting service that doesn't have a management layer on top of Foundry, you may not have this problem. I know for sure it works on a locally hosted Foundry, which is what we're looking at right now on my laptop. It just didn't work for ForgeVTT.com when I tested it there. So, but otherwise, yeah, new shield type, new armor icon to help differentiate more easily between the two and just make it a little easier on the eyes, I think. Let's see. Moving on, the next feature for release 1.21 is adding the equip, unequip toggle buttons to the NPC sheet. So yeah, I already showed you that. Like I said, it's only for armor and weapon types. So you can see there's no equip, unequip toggle for his torch, nor for any of these monster abilities. But for anything that's an actual weapon, like these two here or the shield here, those have the equip, unequip toggles. And like I said, they're not required to be used. He can attack with Scythe of the Reaper even if it's not equipped, or the Spiked Cudgel even though it's not equipped. And of course the shield does not apply anything to his armor class. This 6 is just a solid 6. If you want to change between equipped and unequipped, you have to manually update the armor class. But at least you've got that, so it makes it easier to manage the token overlay, which is really the main reason that was added, was just for the token overlay. Okay? All right, next feature. Global logging function. So this is just something I added. So I just opened up my browser console here. Let's get rid of the word chat. And you can see now what I did was I've tried to standardize the way I log information. And now I have lots of informational logs, and they're color coded, so you can see Hype 3E in square brackets and it's blue. That means it's informational, and it says informational as well. Sometimes it'll say Hype 3E and the word warn, W-A-R-N, and that'll be yellow. Or it'll say error, and that'll be in red. So those are the three types of log entries you might find. I don't happen to have any warnings or errors in here, I don't think. I couldn't find any earlier anyway. But that's what that looks like when you need to look at the browser console. If you've never looked at it before, you wouldn't even know the difference. But if you've had to look at this before, you'll now see that there's a difference. And I'm also timestamping this. Now it is timestamped to GMZ, GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. So it's not my actual time zone or your actual time zone, but it is an absolute time, which can help with figuring out when certain things happened. So, all right, so I did that. That's, very few people are even ever going to run into that. But if you have an issue to report to me because you ran into a bug, having that console log that be a little more readable, you can provide a screenshot or copy paste or whatever makes it easier for me as well. So, okay, let's see. Next feature is creating a known languages pop-up. So when you have a character, you may have, if you're playing a game, you've got this languages field right here. And up until now, this has been a single line text field, and you just had to type in the languages that you knew. Well, I finally took advantage of a languages list that I had in the configuration options going back months that I never actually used. I finally decided to use it, and I created a little pop-up app here. So if we hit our little book icon next to languages, there's our pop-up app, and you can see these are the languages I have selected, and you can see these are those here. Common is always at the top, not in alphabetical with Berber, but I figure common everybody has, so I just put it at the top, and then everything is alphabetical after that. And if I want to change, I just click on one to toggle it, Celtic Quaedelic, and you can see it got added right here as well. So it's sort of being updated in real time. All right, and I can uncheck it and it updates it again. Take Hyperborean off, add Cimmerian. That's how it works. It's very simple. Incidentally, the, oops, I didn't mean to do that, but we'll go into Argyros because he's a better example, because I know this one. I changed the color coding on the attribute weapon annotations as well. So here, I did the same thing now. This used to be bright red, and it was kind of painful on the eyes. So I said, okay, let's find a better color. So I went with kind of easy to read blue with a very slight glow to it. So yeah, I just changed the coloring there too. By the way, this is friendly for both dark theme and light theme. We're currently seeing light theme. A lot of my videos I'm in dark theme, and you're going to see the same blue color there. It's not the red that it used to be. Okay. And let's see, the last feature as part of 1.21 was missile weapons that allow a strength modifier to damage should add it automatically. So what I have done, we're going to go back and look at the weapon annotations again. So if we look at bow long composite, up until now, if you wanted to include the strength modifier, you had to do it like this. You see at str or strength.dmgmod with a capital M in the middle there. You had to do it that way in order to include the strength damage modifier to your damage roll. Okay? And now, with this new feature, if I have the two annotations where strength will automatically be applied would be, let's see, I have to find it now. Melee weapon may be hurled one-handed, strength damage adjustment applies. So if you're hurling a dagger or you're hurling a hand axe, you would want to do that. By the way, this is not one of the weapon annotations in the player's handbook on page 137. However, it is part of the melee weapons table, and it's specifically listed melee weapons there if they have range increments that says that those are hurled weapons and strength damage applies. So I took and interpreted that as a weapon annotation. That's why that's there, even though it's not part of the regular annotations list on page 137 of the player's handbook. But you've got that there. So if you've got hurled weapons, you can just select that, and the system will now automatically add your strength damage modifier on a successful hit on the damage roll. If you have strength built into your formula, the system is smart enough to not double dip that. It'll see that variable and it will not add it again. However, if you have hard-coded your strength bonus, let's say you've got a +1 damage modifier, and you just added +1 to the damage roll, well, the system's not smart enough to know what that +1 is for. So it will get double dipped. So it's something to be aware of. If you've hard-coded your strength modifiers on damage rolls for certain weapons, you're going to want to pull those out if you start using the annotations to do it. So this one will do it. Also, this one here, strength damage adjustment applies for certain missile weapons. So this is for any hurled missile weapons, like, well, and also slings, but it's for darts and it's, you know, things like that. Anything that's a hurled missile weapon, again, in the player's handbook, you see missile weapons are broken up into hurled versus, I think it's propelled, meaning that it's a bow or a crossbow or something. And sling falls under propelled, but it does allow the strength damage adjustment. So you would want to apply this one right here. This one here, the bottom one, so I'm going to undo this. This bottom one applies only if the draw weight is adjusted. So what this is really, this is a legit annotation, but it does not tell the system to apply the strength modifier. It's really just an informational thing to say strength modifier is a possibility if the weapon has been adjusted, if you've had your bow custom made for you or whatever. Okay, so if you want to use the annotation, you're going to want to do this one for your composite longbow, for example. You could have them both, but this one here is the main one that you would want to have selected in order to ensure that your damage modifier is being added, your strength-based damage modifier is being added automatically for you. And then you can see the annotations that were previously selected are listed right here. And so I have added that annotation, so it's going to add the strength mod. Now I've already got it here. So here, like I said, it won't double dip it. It's smart enough to not do that. So if I actually attack with the composite longbow, we'll just equip that and then we'll make an attack. And I'll just give it a 19 so I know that I hit. So there's no question about it. We roll damage. And you can see here when I expand this out, the strength damage modifier is only listed once. It's not going to get listed twice. And I can also then, but just to prove that it really is working, if I just pull this back out, back to 1d6 only, And we'll do another attack. And then we'll roll damage again. You're going to see strength is still included, but now it says annotation. So that tells you the difference. Strength up here is because, oopsie, when strength shows up here, it's because that was actually listed in the damage dice roll formula. Down here it says annotation because it's coming from that annotation that had been selected. So I'll give you a little bit of a feedback as to where that's coming from. Now melee weapons, they just always apply strength, by the way. So there's nothing you have to do with melee, no annotations you have to worry about. You don't have to put the strength variable in there. Melee always have the strength damage modifier applied. This is really just for missile weapons, all right? And that basically covers everything. Those are all of the new features that are part of releases 1.20, which was a couple of weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, and 1.21, which is out today. Okay, folks, happy gaming. This is Dave, signing off.